Welcome to the Urban Gardener YouTube channel. My name is Alexis and I am the Urban Gardener. This video is sponsored by Outside Pride as I'm using their seeds to start my fall garden. So a question that usually comes up for me, like when I get into or transition from the summer season into the fall season and I'm starting seeds, is how am I going to start my seeds? Whether I'm going to start them indoors or directly sow them in the ground outdoors. And some of the things that you have to take into consideration, especially when you're starting your seeds from late summer into early fall, is how fast do they mature before your first frost date. So for me, my first frost date, it says on the Farmer's Almanac it's supposed to be like November 15th, but I'm gonna guess it's probably gonna be like late October or early November. So I'm not sure how many days that is. We're in early September now, but it's not that much time. So for that, I'll have to make sure that whatever is a fast growing crop that will mature about 40 to 60 days, then I will directly sow those into the ground versus my seedlings that take a little bit longer to mature. I'll usually typically start those inside under grow lights about 8 to 10 weeks before my first frost date. So my rule of thumb when I'm starting seeds or directly sowing them into the ground, like I said, I like to sow them, the fast growing cool weather plants, about 40 to 60 days before my first frost date. And I actually started these late August. These are actually like your lettuce and spinach and like your root vegetables like radishes, beets, turnips, and even carrots. I directly sow those into the ground, especially root vegetables, because they don't like to be disturbed. And I sow those in the ground late summer because they can mature, the warmth and the heat, the temperature will help them germinate. And then I typically sow them, like you see here, underneath like a shady area in my garden so that they won't get beat up by the summer sun. And so I have like some lettuce here that's already germinated, some that are germinating right now, that are maturing, and they've been doing just fine underneath this here tomato that has been growing and allowing shade to cover them, to protect them. And I'm also directly sowing the cilantro seeds from Outside Pride into the ground now because they can just germinate right now. The heat will help them to germinate, and then they are a cool weather herb. They prefer cooler temperatures. I know people are like, cilantro goes with salsa. Yeah, and tomatoes are part of salsa and they grow in the summertime, but cilantro is actually a cool weather herb and does not like the heat. So I typically sow them in the ground, directly in the ground, and they'll germinate, and then by the time it gets cool outside, they're like mature and they're perfect temperature for them. Springtime and fall cilantro, so it loves those type of cool temperatures. And then for my long growing cool weather vegetables like your broccoli, your kale, collards, Brussels sprouts, and cabbage, those do not like the heat. Well, I won't say they don't like the heat, but they grow better when it's a little bit cooler outside. And they are most attracted to a lot of pests. So I typically grow them about 8 to 10 weeks indoors before my first frost date. That way I can just nurture them a little bit, let them get a little bit more mature. And then when they're like a little bit like bigger, like this size, and the temperatures are cooling down in my zone 7B, in September, then I transplant them into the ground so that they can get established and grow a little bit more before that first freeze, which they'll be perfectly fine. They'll be able to handle that frost and everything. And so this is typically, what I typically do with, directly sowing my seeds versus starting them indoors under grow lights. So as you're starting seeds for the fall, the first thing you need to consider is when is your first frost date. So for me, like I said, according to the almanac, it says November 15th. I'm going to give it about late October, early November, and count backwards to the date that you're currently at, and then also look at seed packets to see how many days they take to mature, and look up the list of all your cool weather vegetables. So sorry, there's a fly. So like for cool weather vegetables, you can grow lettuce, you can grow spinach, you can grow radishes. I'm thinking I'm forgetting something. Beets, carrots, turnips. I'm probably forgetting something else as far as root vegetables, but those are typically your cool weather vegetables, and you want to directly sow those into the ground. They grow a little bit quicker, they can germinate, they can, be under shade and handle the heat a little more. And your long growing vegetables that are cool weather, like your broccoli, Brussels sprouts, kale, cabbage, and collards, start those indoors and count backwards to how many days it takes to mature. And those type of crops usually can handle freezes. Sometimes they need a little bit of cover protection on them, but they should be just fine for the most part. Cauliflower, I forgot about cauliflower as well. And so start those indoors about 10 weeks before your first frost. So I hope this was helpful for you all. I know it's a lot to try to, figure out, decipher when do I start my seeds indoors versus when do I start them outdoors. But this is typically the rule of thumb for starting your seeds. So hope this was helpful, and as always, happy gardening.